another SCDA conversation, and today I'm joined by Ken Alexander, a freelance director who has delivered a masterclass for SCDA in the past. We're very grateful that Ken's giving us some time today to talk to us about directing and what he thinks makes a good play. Good morning, Ken.
Good morning, Carole. How are you?
I'm not too bad. How are you?
Yeah, good, thanks.
And at the moment, it's actually a bit sunny.
Yeah, the sun has disappeared here in Perth, but you've got some coming through your window, it looks of it.
I have at the moment, yes, it's not due to last. Anyway, Ken, so today we'd like to talk to you a little bit about what it's like to be a freelance director. I'm sure our members would be really interested to know a little bit about how that works. So that's my first question to you, which is, how did you get into freelance directing?
Well, I spent about half of my career being based in buildings up until 2004. I'd been attached to a building as a trainee and then as an associate and then as an artistic director. And after a period of time, I'd kind of decided that whilst I loved running a building, I needed to take more time out to focus on pure directing.
Great, thank you. I had no idea that you'd come from a building, and I can understand from the recent conversation with Dominic, of course, Dominic Hill from the Citizens Theatre, that there is a lot involved when you are actually in that building that pulls you away from focusing on the directing process.
Yes, totally. That's one of the big challenges. You know, as a building-based artistic director, what's really good about it is that you get to make most of the choices yourself. So you get to choose the plays, you get to choose who's putting them together, who's in them, and how it gets marketed and so forth. So that's always a really good part of it. But you are then also tied in with the things of governance, working with a board. Obviously, a board has to approve all your choices as well. So. And then you're looking at your responsibility to your community and your outreach work, and just the practical day-to-day management of people.
I wondered if you could talk to me a little bit more about perhaps the challenges of being a freelance, particularly in terms of choice and autonomy and things like that.
Well, one of the interesting things I've found is that as a freelance director, I rarely get to choose what I'm working on. Obviously, you get an opportunity to pitch ideas to producers and to theatres of things you'd like to do. But I find that most often it's people coming to me with a project that they'd like me to direct. So quite often I'm not getting to choose the play these days. The choice you get, I guess, is that you have the choice to say, no, I don't really want to do that. But then you have to balance that with, I need the work, so I'm going to have to do that. So you have to be pragmatic. I don't often take on things I really don't like. And actually, sometimes if I've had hesitation about taking a project on, because it doesn't feel quite right or I'm not sure about it, sometimes those have turned out to be the projects I've most enjoyed. And sometimes when you get offered something that you think you're really going to enjoy, it doesn't always turn out to be as enjoyable as you think it might be.
So Ken, have you directed for community groups in the past?
Yes, I have indeed. It's been actually a really important part of some of the stuff I've done, because I started myself doing school shows and then getting involved in a local amateur drama group when I was born in Glasgow but brought up in the Midlands. So my first experience of a drama club was in Leicester, when it was connected to a local church. So I've always felt it's been an important part of how I got started, and especially when I was at the Byre, I was very much involved in the outreach work. So we worked very closely with a lot of our local amateur groups, and I've been involved in running youth theatres in St Andrews and in Perth as well. And one of the things I did when I was at St Andrews, we had a period when we'd knocked down the old Byre Theatre and were building new ones. So we had 4 years where we were out on tour with the company. And one of the things I did was to get involved in working with some of the local amateur groups. And I was fortunate enough to be asked to direct a show for Kirkcaldy Amateur Operatic Society, Sweet Charity, and subsequently I've gone on to do a few other shows with them over the years, including co-writing a couple of shows as well. And that's always been really rewarding. And the Kirkcaldy people particularly have been great at coming to see the work I've been doing elsewhere as well. They've been really supportive.
And was that at the Adam Smith Theatre?
Yes, yes, it was, it was a nice theatre to work in as well. And we at the Byre we'd taken a couple of tours in there as well, so it was nice to have that connection.
So this is not a loaded question. I just wanted to ask you, obviously having this span of work, what do you think are the main differences between working in the amateur sector and the professional sector?
Do you know, the only real difference is the time over which you prepare a show. Obviously, within the professional world, you're generally rehearsing a show for 3 to 4 weeks maximum, whereas with some of the community groups I've worked with, you've been rehearsing for 12 weeks or more. So the biggest challenge, I think, is trying to pick up the momentum from rehearsal to rehearsal. When you're doing it on a daily basis, there's a built-in momentum to rehearsals. But when you do it for 2 hours on a Monday night and then come back a week later, you have to pick it up again. You have to be, as a director, you have to be quite disciplined in making sure you know what you want to get through at every rehearsal, and be disciplined in making sure you've got a well-planned timetable. Obviously, you need flexibility in that because you don't always get through everything you want to get through. Some things happen more quickly and some things take more time, depending on the skills and abilities of the company. But the main difference really is not so much in the quality of performance. I've worked with some brilliant amateur performers, but in the way you approach rehearsals, and also the very short technical time that a lot of amateur companies have.
That's really interesting, because I think something, talking to directors working in professional capacity, is how much rehearsal time has reduced over the time in professional theatre. Yeah,
in fact, because I started at Perth Theatre, they were on a 2.5 weekly repertory cycle. So the first plays I was doing professionally, we only had 2 full weeks in the rehearsal room, and then half a week on stage before opening it. So that was even tighter, but it did, as a trainee, it taught you, discipline. You really had to go into rehearsals and hit the ground running.
So Ken, you mentioned earlier that quite often you are brought in to direct a piece that's already been decided by the company or the building. At what point do you become involved? Are you involved in the casting at all?
It varies considerably. Most times, yes, I am asked to cast the show, and indeed like to cast my own shows as well. Where that is different tends to be if you're working with an ensemble. For example, at Pitlochry Festival Theatre, where I've done about 12 or 13 productions over a number of years, they tend to employ an ensemble of 17 or 18 actors for the season. So that used to be the team of directors getting together and then meeting people at auditions and recalls and stuff, and then whittling it down to the needs of 6 different plays and 3 different directors. So there's a bit of negotiation goes on in those circumstances. Sometimes I get to completely cast a show by myself, exactly as I'd wish to cast. Sometimes if I'm working with a commercial producer, they might want a name in the show, and sometimes they'll come with a name already attached to the show, and then you cast the rest of it. Or sometimes you work with the producer to find names for a show as well.
In contrast, you also mentioned that from time to time you will want to initiate a project, and then you would approach a company. Could you talk a little bit about that, how that would work?
Yeah, sometimes there are plays where I've wanted to do them for a while, or plays that I'd been planning to do and then not been able to do. So with those things, I would go to a producer or a theatre and say, I'm really interested in doing this play, would you be interested in making it happen? Those opportunities are, I have to say, few and far between. For example, at Pitlochry, the programme was always decided by the artistic director. So the only option you had there is to say yes or no to the production you were offered. Fortunately, I was always offered interesting stuff. But getting the chance to choose a play and do it is more of a luxury in a freelance world.
So Ken, I feel that brings us quite nicely into the kind of at the heart of things we've been looking at recently in SCDA, and that is what is a good play? What makes a good play? What do you look for if you're going to be trying to pitch this to a company or a building or to Creative Scotland? What is it you look for?
I think it seems like a straightforward question, but it's a really tricky answer. The plays are really subjective things. You know, you can sit down in a theatre with a friend and both get completely different views of a production you've just watched. You know, you might love it and your friend hates it. So it's very difficult to say what makes a good play, because a good play is different to different people. I can only go, I guess, in terms of my work as a director, I like to find a personal connection with the piece I'm working on. Obviously, you can go in and just direct something quite mechanically, but there's no real joy in that. So I tend to get drawn to character-driven plays, I think, and plays that tell a good story. I'm not especially interested in creating work which is I don't know how to put it, work that's maybe complicated for the sake of being complicated, or arty for the sake of being arty. And I think you need to do things with style and find your own stamp on it. But for me, getting a play that connects with audiences is the real driver. And it's, as an artistic director running seasons of work, then I was looking for a variety of plays that can connect with our audience in different ways, or connect with different parts of the community. One of the most of the theatres I worked in, like Perth or St Andrews and others, have been the only theatre in the town. So the theatre there has a responsibility to appeal to as wide a community as possible. Whereas in larger cities, then you can afford to focus on a specific audience or a particular style or work which is for a particular genre. So I think the challenges are, as in finding individual plays for me to direct, is finding something that I can connect with, but more importantly connects with an audience and tells a good story. I like to draw audiences in. I love to see audiences laugh. I love to see audiences emotionally involved in the piece and invested in the piece. There's nothing worse than coming out of the theatre and actually not having touched you at all. You might enjoy the spectacle, or you might have had a wee laugh, but actually it hasn't connected with you here or up here. So those are the important things for me. It sounds a wee bit general, but that's important for me, that's what makes a good play.
It's interesting you mentioned about some of the buildings you've worked in being the only show in town, and to a large extent that's the same situation for amateur theatre. In some communities, you know, they could be the main source of theatre. And I suppose one of the risks of that, and I don't know if you found this yourself, is that you can become, you can find yourself doing the same kind of material because you believe that's what your audience want.
Yeah.
So how do you find that balance of introducing some new things? I don't know. What do you think about that?
Yeah, that is always the challenge, I think, with any theatre based in a community where there's a loyal theatre audience. That the danger is you just continue to produce work for the same audience over and over again. But I think there's equally a danger in ignoring that audience as well. I've seen directors go into theatres and basically say, we don't want you, we want a new audience. And that's not a good way to work either. The way I've always tended to try and work is that you take your core audience and you kind of build on it. And what I have tended to experience is that if the audience get to trust you as a director and the people you employ, and if your productions are of a consistent standard and the production values are high and the casting is good, then they will trust you to take them in directions that they may not necessarily have felt were right for them. I remember when Joan Knight asked me to do Liz Lockhead's Mary Queen of Scots got her head chopped off. It was the first time a play like that had ever been done as part of the repertory season at Perth, and it was quite radical. It was only the second time the play had been done, the first one being done by Communicado, which was a very different company from Perth Rep at the time. And so it was different. And so we didn't do anything to try and make it more audience friendly for Perth. We just honestly we made our take on the show and put it in front of them, tried to make it as entertaining and as engaging as possible. And actually it did pay off. And I think it was typified by a response to someone I spoke to coming out of the theatre, and she said, I really enjoyed that. I wouldn't like to see it every time I came to the theatre, but I did enjoy it. And I think that kind of gives you your answer in many ways. It's about encouraging people to try different things. And it's probably a process of evolution rather than revolution. When sometimes you can go in and do something really splashy, which wakes people up and is exciting, but at the same point, it's not healthy to just alienate people. You do want to take them with you on the journey. And that's probably, if I was to give any advice, that's what it would be with established companies and established audiences, is gently nudge them in new directions, and then find out what they'll take and what they won't take, and what will continue to reinvest that audience, what will bring younger people in alongside your existing audience. I get cross when people, accuse some of the repertory theatres, they just play to an older audience, as if they had no value, because older members of the community are as important as young members of the community. And as an artistic director or a director, it's your job to find as many ways as possible to engage all aspects of the community.
Thank you so much for speaking to me today, Ken. I think one of the things I'm going to take away is, because I love sound bites, is going to be, it's about evolution, not revolution. And that idea of that long relationship with an audience, how that does allow you to bring in some new material, which may be slightly outside your normal repertoire. And as you say, if you've got that relationship, your audience will go with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
It's been really, really lovely speaking to you today. Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure. Thank you very much for asking me.